on the same page at this point, because people can't afford private health care in this country. And however you feel about that, and maybe you have a private health care plan where you are extremely happy and you just want to keep it, and that is your right to feel that way. Let's just have a debate in the media, whether we're talking about war or whether we're talking about health care. Now we know where the Obama administration stands on this, at least at this point, because on March 5th, when President Obama had the White House Health Care Summit, of 120 people sort of looking across the political spectrum and the option spectrum to start to hammer out what would be a good plan in this country, they invited no single-payer advocate. There was such an outcry. Well, Congressman Conyers, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, who has introduced a single-payer bill year after year, was at a Congressional Black Caucus meeting with President Obama and asked if he could go to the meeting, and the White House said no. So there was such an outcry then that finally they said he could come, but PNHP, and I see, by the way, that there is going to be a protest of Physicians for National Health Program, and I was interested in the name of this other organization, C-SPAN, so I looked quickly, C-SPAN is sponsoring this? Oh, Chicago Single Payer Action Network. That's interesting. It's interesting because if you put out C-SPAN will be at the Sim Insurance Company, 522 West Monroe, June 2nd, maybe everyone will show you're the most powerful person on earth, or whispering in his ear a demand. If he can't point out the window and say, but if I do that, they will storm the Bastille. If there's no one out there, he's in trouble. And then there's going to be times where you totally disagree with what he has done, and what are you going to do when the community organizer-in-chief has become the commander-in-chief? How are people going to organize and make your demands heard? You know what Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. I think people for a long time now feel that they've been beating their heads against a brick wall. And as we've seen increasingly, unfortunately, people have had their heads beat against the brick wall, but that is something else. People have been beating their heads against a brick wall, and now that wall is a door. And the door is open a crack. And the question is whether it will be kicked open or slammed shut. And that's not up to that one person in the White House. That is up to all of you. This is just a moment of opportunity, a moment of possibility. It is not done. And that's the critical point. In fact, it would be frightening if this moment passed without the kind of change that not only matters in this country, but because we are the most powerful country on earth, it matters for people all over the world. Now, before President Obama was inaugurated, you remember when he and Michelle Obama went to the White House? They were meeting with the Bushes their first time in the White House after he was elected. It was an afternoon. I was invited on CNN to be on Rick Sanchez's show, and so they were talking about something on the show, and I was watching the video screen at CNN, and I was seeing them walk into the White House, and oh my gosh, and they asked me what I thought about something, but it wasn't about that, and I'm looking at this moment, and I said, wait a second, we have to take pause. Barack Hussein Obama, Michelle LaVaughn Robinson Obama. Her grandfather came from South Carolina up in the Great Migration North and settled here in Chicago. She is the descendant of slaves, which means their children, Sasha Malia, are descendants of slaves, walking into the most famous house on earth, the White House, which is built by slaves. Let's just take pause. And then, the inauguration. Actually, a few days before the inauguration, the train ride that they took from Philadelphia down through Wilmington, picked up the Vikings, then through Baltimore. They're retracing the train ride of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln had to be spirited through Baltimore because Maryland was a secessionist state and they were afraid he'd be killed through it, and then went through Washington, D.C. That was the day. It was Saturday before the inauguration. It was Michelle Obama's 45th birthday. That train ride's so significant. Last Saturday, I was at the Philadelphia train station, 30th Street station. It's unusual to go into a train station and have that be your destination, not be the place you're going through, but I went from New York on the train on Amtrak to Philadelphia for National Train Day, celebrating 4 Pullman borders. There are not many who have survived. They were all over 90. A remarkable history talking about trains. And that train ride the Obamas took made me think about this remarkable man in A. Philip Randolph. How many of you have heard of who he is? For those of you who are young in the audience, write your papers on him. If you're looking for a good paper, write books on him, learn about him, old and young. One of the great organizers of the 20th century. He organized the 1963 March on Washington for President, where Dr. King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech. And he founded the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, the union, the first black trade union for the Pullman porters, you know, the second largest employer of black men in America in the 20s and 30s and the 40s. Came out of the Civil War. George Pullman had these porters where the wealthy could sleep in the berths, and these black porters, the conditions very difficult. They'd sleep on the dining room tables or on the floor, or if they were lucky, because often they didn't get to sleep at all. And they were all called George, for George Pullman. They didn't say name George, but they were all called George, which is why they got to union organize. And they called him an outside organizer, A. Philip Randolph, because they would get fired if they tried to organize and keep their jobs. And on Inauguration night, I went to the Peace Ball, which was separate from the parties, but it was at the Postal Museum right next to Union Station in Washington, and Harry Belafonte was there. And Belafonte told me the story that I had heard about of, he was friends, Belafonte, with Eleanor Roosevelt. Eleanor Roosevelt told him about inviting A. Philip Randolph to the White House to meet with FDR, right, many decades ago. And A. Philip Randolph laid out the demands for black people in this country, for working people in this country, and FDR listened intently. And when he was done, he said, I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but you gotta make me do it. Make me do it. Interestingly, that same night, at the Peace Ball, I saw another friend, and she had been in Montclair, New Jersey about a year and a half ago at a fundraiser for Obama. This is before it was clear who was going to win, and there were about 150 people there, and he was taking questions. He was about to run out, and someone raised her hand and said, okay, I'll take one last question. The person asked about the Middle East, about Israel, Palestine, West Bank, Gaza. What are you going to do about it? And Senator Obama, at the time, repeated the story of Eleanor Roosevelt bringing A. Philip Randolph to meet with FDR, and FDR listening to his demands. And then Senator Obama repeated what FDR said to A. Philip Randolph. He said, make me do it. That's really the challenge of today. It's not about that one person in the White House. It is about all of you. When I saw the Obamas